Hey guys, it's Kohl Weisman with Opera Grand Rapids Singing in Place series. Shout out to Opera Grand Rapids for supporting their singers and making this happen. This is awesome. And if you want to support Opera Grand Rapids, be sure to donate on their website, come out to our shows. I got involved with them as a member of the chorus for Turandot, which unfortunately got postponed. But on the bright side, if you want to get involved in the chorus, they're always looking for singers, and that's looking to come up in the fall, so stay tuned. But for this episode, I'd like to give my own version of a very brief history of opera, sort of talk a little bit about my experience with it and the music and the style of singing, and talk a little bit about microphones. You might probably wondering what an opera singer has to do with a microphone, but we'll get to that. But first, I'd like to share one of my favorite songs from the art song repertoire, a repertoire that is beloved by singers but is all too unheard. And this song is by Francis Poulenc from 1940. It's called Hotel, and it was written for piano and voice, but I've arranged it for guitar here. It's quintessentially French, and it has a lot of different influences, and it's a lot of fun. So here's Hotel.
Ma chambre a la forme d'une cage, le soleil passe son bras par la fenêtre. Mais moi qui veux fumer pour faire de mirage, j'allume au feu du jour ma
So one of my favorite things about opera is its diversity. I came from musical theater, started doing that in 5th grade, and sang with the Grand Rapids Civic Theater in middle school, and I'd never really thought about opera or singing it or really listened to it at all until I was lucky enough to be able to see my first show at the Met, The Tales of Hoffmann by Offenbach, and I had all the expectations of stiff period costumes and all that, but I was totally blown away. Subverted all my expectations. There was mad scientists and lots of drinking and dancing, singing robot and all this. But what really shook me was the singing was so powerful. It was unbelievable how, with no amplification other than from the natural techniques, that they could fill an opera hall that big. And coming from musical theater, where I was used to having a lavalier microphone taped to my face and all of that, and really having the listener be brought to me by the loudspeaker, it was crazy to see how these singers would carry their voices to the listener in their seats with the technique. And so I really got interested in that then, and at college at Yale I was able to work with voice teachers and with an awesome thing called the Yale Baroque Opera Project, led by Grant Herod, to dig into the technique. And there's really no better, the very beginning is really the best place to start for young singers, it turns out, because the Baroque from the 17th century, those opera houses were not nearly as big as they would become later on. You don't have big Strauss orchestras that you're competing with to get loud, so the techniques were fundamentally the same, but they were applied in different ways. Because, I mean, the opera houses, while they weren't as big, there was drinking, eating, talking in the audience, and so the singer would still have to have a real command of the room with their voice. And while they didn't have microphones, they had access to shouting, screaming, belting, but there's a technique that they would apply called sprezzatura that Grant Herd would talk about, which sort of is the effective easiness that sort of gets amplified by the technique. And so the idea isn't just to be loud for loudness' sake, it's the idea of amplifying the natural ease in the voice, which lets you put on all different kinds of characters, whisper, and do all the things you need to do to carry out a show without talking, just singing, without a microphone. And so I was really fascinated by what at first seemed like this impossible, mystical technique, but it has really interesting applications, especially in the Baroque, with a lot of ornamentation, a lot of different colors that are used. And so I'd like to sing a song from the Baroque by a great English composer, Henry Purcell, who's famous for Dido and Aeneas, the great opera, but I'll be doing an aria from a show called Timon of Athens, after Shakespeare, which is actually a semi-opera. There's music written over the play. And Timon of Athens is the classical misanthrope, the OG social distancer. And this show the aria shows a lot of character and sort of personality and a lot of the range of ornamentations that were used in the Baroque. And so here it is. Here's The Cares of Lovers from Timon of Athens.
The cares of lovers, their alarms, their sighs, their tears have powerful charms. And if so sweet their torment is, ye gods, how ravishing, ye gods, how ravishing, how ravishing the bliss, so soft, so gentle, so soft, so gentle is their pain. 'Tis in a pleasure to complain.
So yeah, that's a lot of rangy characterization, a lot of the ornamentations you could see in the Baroque. But now to jump all the way up to the 20th century, things sound a little bit different, but a lot of the principles are pretty much the same. And the 20th century is probably my favorite music comes from the 20th century, and opera is no exception. It really displayed the variety of opera, from things like Janacek's Cunning Little Vixen, story about a fox and animal creatures, with a lot of folk music influence. And I was lucky enough to sing in a production of that with the Opera Theater of Yale College. Shout out to them. And shows like Carlisle Floyd's Susanna, which brings the rural American South to the grand opera. And but as a jazz person, I'd always loved jazz. The show that stood out to me was Porgy and Bess. It's just got to be a groundbreaking show from George Gershwin in 1935. And these shows really showed just what opera can be. Because, it really isn't a genre of music. You're not going to hear anything like the 17th century and the 20th century. They're so different. It's more of an approach to kind of theater. You got characters on the stage talking, doing all the usual storytelling, but when they open their mouths, it's just singing the whole time. And so it's instantly elevated to this sort of fantasy. And so the opportunities for just creativity and production and all the different elements of the theater really opens up with opera, and that's really what drew me to that crazy production of the Conte d'Hoffmann that I saw. But again, Porgy and Bess, I'm going to do a little homage to Porgy and Bess in a second, but I first wanted to show the original versions of so many songs that when I first had heard them, I always knew them as jazz standards, Summertime, songs like this, Ain't Necessarily So, classic tunes. I had no idea that they were written for an opera, in an opera, as arias for singers that would be singing in this broad bel canto technique. And so I'll be singing on the microphone for this one. Different style. I'll be able to put more breath into it, a little bit more whisper, and a little bit more contemporary sound into the arrangement. But first I'd like to show you the great Barbara Hendricks doing Summertime, which a lot of people probably haven't heard the way this was originally sung, which sounded like this. So I'll be doing something a little bit different from that, inspired by Paul Bley, the great jazz pianist's interpretations of the song "I Loves You, Porgy." Here's a little Porgy and Bess medley. Summertime, and the living is easy. The fish are jumping, and the cotton is high. Your daddy's rich, and your mama's good looking. So hush, pretty baby, don't you cry. One of these mornings, you're gonna rise up singing. You'll spread your wings, and you'll take to the sky. But till that morning, nothing can harm you. With Daddy and Mommy standing by. baby, don't you cry. Hush, pretty baby, don't you cry. Hush, pretty baby, don't you cry. Thanks, guys, and I hope to see you at some of our shows.